Kingdom Hearts is without a doubt a beloved series in the vast world of JRPGs that's always been able to recreate some fantastic Disney worlds with some fun added changes of their own. And sometimes those worlds can totally suck. Hey guys, it's Crimson Rosser once again, and today we are talking about 10 of the worst Kingdom Hearts worlds ever. Before we begin, I want to point out that these are just my opinion, and if you agree with me, that's pretty dope that you do, and if you don't, let me know in the comments, and I'd love to chat with you why. Also be sure to like and subscribe, and with that shameless plug out of the way, let's get started. You know, I gotta be honest, as much as I love the original Kingdom Hearts, it really does not have some of the best levels in the franchise. And a good example of that is one of the early levels, Wonderland. Wonderland at first starts off as a pretty goofy and amusing level. You walk through a hallway, then talk to the doorknob, and then drink a potion that makes you smaller. After that, though, is when the level starts getting worse and worse. You enter the Queen's Court, and as you could guess, you see Alice's trial going on, and in order to protect her from, you need to prove her innocence. And that basically just turns the level into a tedious fetch quest of finding evidence in a level that focuses a bit too much on the growing and shrinking gimmick in it. This level also requires the uses of potions and ethers for certain flowers to launch out items. So if you don't have either, you are going to need to go buy some or continuously fight enemies so they hopefully drop them. It's a starting level that relies way too much on a gimmick to be any fun whatsoever. You don't really have any interest in exploring or fighting through it because the gimmick is such a pain in the ass. Plus, this level has the Trick Master for the boss. You know, that really annoying boss that you need to jump up to hit and will spin fireballs like an asshole. Yeah, do I need to say any more than that? The 100 Acre Wood levels in Kingdom Hearts games are usually kind of a middle ground when it comes to level design for them. Not exactly good, but not exactly the worst thing ever either. Just a small little minigame collection kind of thing you can get through pretty quickly. But in Chain of Memories, that fun charm is ripped apart by one single aspect. You see, in the 100 Acre Woods level for Chain of Memories, you have to call Pooh over in order to get him to follow you places. But whenever you try to, it seems like he never wants to listen to you. Driving you absolutely insane with the sheer amount of bullshit times he just straight up ignores you. Also, as time goes on, he gets tired and needs honey to refill his energy. I don't know, maybe he has diabetes and he needs sugar or something. I don't know how it works. It's a tedious nonsense concept that you have to keep calling him over for, and calling him over is already enough of a pain in the ass. It is. See, I'm tripping over my words because of how angry I'm getting. Look what we need to do, Pooh Bear. Trust me, by the end of this level, you will be screaming at the screen for this nonsense. Thankfully, like the rest of the 100 Acre Woods in every other Kingdom Hearts game, you can skip this one, which I definitely recommend you do if you want to keep your sanity. I'm gonna be a straight shooter with ya. I do have a couple of problems with Kingdom Hearts 3 as a whole. Although, I will say that I genuinely love almost every single one of the levels you can play through in the game. However, one level I don't really like all that much, and put on this list as you can expect, is the Arendelle level in the game, aka the Frozen World, for one major reason. It just doesn't feel like a level set in the Frozen universe. Does Frozen have a universe? And I don't know, we'll put a pin in that for another day. You see, in every world in Kingdom Hearts, you're supposed to feel like you're going through the Disney movie/world itself. For the Toy Story one, you explore Galaxy Toys and Andy's room. For Monsters Incorporated, you go through the factory. And for Pirates of the Caribbean, you sail throughout the sea. But with Frozen's world, you just run through an ice dungeon, with barely any references to the movie other than like the 2 or 3 times you actually talk to the characters, and the song Let It Go. If you want to build a snowman also plays, but it's like 10 seconds, so we're just gonna forget it exists. Hell, you don't even team up with any of the characters. You just team up with the snowman monster at the last maybe 20 minutes of the level. For something that was so critically acclaimed and beloved by millions, it's strange to see Frozen get this kind of a treatment. Oh, yeah, totally. We definitely couldn't have made a list about the worst Kingdom Hearts worlds without bringing up Atlantica, the most infamously hated level in the entire franchise. But what makes it hated for the people who haven't played it isn't something like the enemies or the combat. That was more of a divisive thing in the first game, but we're talking about two here. It's actually the fact that there aren't any enemies or combat in the Kingdom Hearts 2 Atlantica. You see, in this version, you don't fight a single enemy other than technically the final boss. It's done through a rhythm game. It's weird and kind of shitty. Yeah, instead you spend all of your time here playing a bunch of rhythm games that are just songs from the movie, and I think, again, a big think, that they created one or two for their own. And while it's easy to see that a lot of the actors for this are trying their best, the songs just do not sound great. They sound very lifeless in comparison to the movie. Adding onto this is, well, like I stated before, the only time you fight the boss is in a fucking rhythm game. You know, in an action RPG of all things. I still don't think how many times I can say it, I can convey how stupid that whole concept is. But let me be honest, that's not the worst thing. The worst bullshit of this level is that they have the audacity to lock certain levels behind story progression. They really thought that people would be obsessed to come back for this. It's unbelievable. You know, one of the best aspects of the Kingdom Hearts series is just how impressive a lot of the final levels in the games are. Which is what the first game, if I'm being honest, really lacked the most, in all honesty. Now, at the start, it looks really cool from a visual perspective. It's basically a lot of destroyed worlds kind of amalgamated together into one world, and you think that's cool. Although it's pretty bare bones. You see, the first part is just running from spot to spot and then fighting enemies in a, as I stated, pretty cool area, but it's pretty lifeless. Once you get to the second part, however, that's where it starts to get worse. The biggest weakness of the second half is just how it basically just has you entering areas that are just copy-pasted from past worlds. You go to the hub world, kinda, I think it's a hub world, I'm not really sure what to call it. The Olympus Coliseum area where you don't fight enemies, you just run into the Coliseum. You go to a part in Traverse Town, so on and so forth. You gotta rinse and repeat that for every level, and you basically start to realize that it's just annoying padding. Now, unlike levels like Atlantica or the GBA 100 Acre Woods, there actually are a bunch of really awesome things about this level. Yeah, I guess a couple. I don't want to over-exaggerate it and set you off for disappointment. But it does keep it from being an absolute garbage fire of a level. Things like the Chernobog boss fight, the intense gauntlet, and the great music keep it from being completely terrible. But outside of those few things, there's really barely any interesting in there. Even if you ignore the other final levels in the series, it's still pretty lackluster. But when you line it up to things like The World That Never Was, Chain of Memories, Castle Oblivion, or even Kingdom Hearts 3's frickin' Keyblade Graveyard, it's very noticeable how lacking it is. Okay, I gotta be honest. I originally had both of these as separate spots on the list, but after looking over my reasons for them being on said list, I ended up noticing that the exact same problems were in both of these worlds. So I decided to just not waste a second spot and place them both on the same spots, since my problems, like I stated before, are exactly the same with each of these worlds. The biggest problem really comes down to their layouts, and just how frustratingly annoying these levels can be. For example, Monstro has these areas where if you fall off a ledge, you have to walk through like 2 different areas, maybe even 3 to 4, just to get back to it. And you will fall off a lot because enemies, the ghosts to be exact, will spawn and attack you. And in order to defend yourself, you have to use air attacks to defeat them a lot of the times, which will cause you to fall off. And while this may not seem like a big problem, this was back in the PS2 era, so loading screens still took pretty long to load bigger areas. And in Lost Jungle, you go through an area where you have to swing from vines in order to reach the next story cutscene in the levels. And it controls about as well as a PS2 platformer vine section does. so you will most likely fall and have to start again and again and again and again. Adding to this, the levels also require a painfully boring amount of backtracking to get through each mission, which drives you insane and forces you to understand that these levels will be longer than they actually are. The final nail in the coffin is the boss fights for each one. They aren't exactly challenging, but they each possess a mechanic that is pretty annoying, from Clayton shooting you at long distances, which can honestly kill you pretty fast if you're playing on harder difficulties, and Monstro having an area that's just 70% poisonous stomach acid. Basically the kind of mechanics that only exist to annoy people and make you feel like you were cheated out of a fair fight. Yeah, I know. I've been dogging pretty hard on the first Kingdom Hearts game. This is the last one on the list, I promise you. This is also probably going to be the most controversial pick on my list, but please just hear me out before you go to the comments and tell me to just never make another video again. Now, when it comes to the first game's version of Hollow Bastion, I think one word sums it up perfectly, and that word is tedious. From the level design, to its length, to even the giant amount of enemies you have to fight throughout it. The level is just filled to the brim with annoying, tedious nonsense. The best example of this is, of course, the constant switches you have to activate around the level to possess. You see, there are two different parts to this level. The first is when you don't have a Keyblade and have to rely on the beast to fight, which honestly just kind of sucks. Thankfully you can use magic in this form, but there's a lot of cutscenes you have to activate for a beast to knock down walls, making levels just constantly, oh, you made it here? Well, cutscene time. And yeah, I don't really like that kind of concept in a game. After that, you do get your Keyblade back, but nothing is really changing. There's an elevator section alongside a puzzle section where you have to move platforms around and use magic to push elevators forward, which honestly, with how it's designed, is really fucking confusing for first timers of this game. Trust me, when I say without a guide, there is a very strong chance you will go to the wrong area more than once in your first playthrough. This is also a level that introduces the defender enemies, the most annoying enemies in the entire game, considering you have to run around to attack them. And there is a lot of pretty meh hit detection in this game when it comes to those enemies. Adding to that are several flying enemies placed in areas that are just so fucking dickish that if you try to attack them without magic, you will fall down and have to restart your backtracking. All in all, it is a level that shows that overly complex level design doesn't always mean good level design. Fun little fact before we get into this one. The Castle Oblivion level in Chain of Memories is actually one of my favorite levels in the entire franchise. It's a really well done level that really sets the tone of this section of the game. It's very intense, it has great boss fights, and it carries a great pace through and through. I absolutely love how each of the characters at the start realize that their memories are completely almost gone, and now they have to just move as fast as they can to defeat Marluxia. Which is why I will forever consider the Castle Oblivion in Recoded as an absolute joke. You see, in the Castle Oblivion level for Recoded, you basically run through blank, empty versions of each world, which already feels like a time waster, right? That sounds like kind of a time waster. But then the mysterious figure there that is so obviously going to be somebody from the organization, aka Roxas, sorry if I spoiled it, fuck that, foreshadows you can fuck some shit up there and basically change how things work in the timeline. Oh, and if you think that's cool, it's later revealed that in order to reach the game's ending, you have to obtain every single alternate path in the false worlds, adding on to the 6 worlds you just re-went through. That adds on 12 more alternate paths. So basically, in order to reach the end of this game, and this isn't how to reach the true end, this is how to reach the normal ending, you have to run through these false worlds for a total of 18 times. I could maybe understand doing something this tedious for a secret ending, but for the normal ending of the game, that is just ridiculous. It's such an insane level of padding that isn't even worth the admittedly cool final boss fight and ending. For such an underrated entry in the franchise, it really sucks that this is how it decides to go out. I'm gonna be honest here, I wasn't even exactly certain if I wanted to put this one on the list, since the Land of Dragons is kind of a split down the middle concept for me, and I remember loving the whole thing as a kid. So when I played through all the games again to make this list, I wanted to see if I still had the same feelings about it now. And as you can see, it wouldn't be on here if my mind didn't change. Now, I want to point out I'm more specifically talking about the first visit to the world, as while I'm not really a massive fan of the second trip there, the first trip through the Land of Dragons is by far way worse. You see, in the Land of Dragons, the character you team up with is Mulan. Makes sense, you're going through the Mulan movies after all. Well, the first one. The second one, for some reason, never gets adapted, I think. Like, it's kind of hard to explain with the second part of this trip. But what makes this level so unbearable is the fact you're forced to team up with Mulan's male form, Ping, throughout basically 80 to 90% of the level. And while other worlds pull the forced team-up mechanic, the big difference is that the party members there are actually useful. Mulan, while pretending to be Ping, she barely fights at all. It's horrible. The game makes you lug around a completely useless party member that eats up one of your slots. And with how many combat-focused sections / missions there are in this level, it's total BS. It's a rage-inducing nightmare. At the end of the level, Ping does go back to being Mulan by the end, and becomes a lot more useful in combat for some reason that she wasn't able to as Ping. But by that point, you're so burnt out and pissed off by her very existence, you just want to be done with her and you're going to kick her out immediately, which really shouldn't be a response to any of these levels. That's why it ended up on the list. If the forced mechanic actually had her be useful, this wouldn't have been on here, but yeah, it's hard to ignore. Yeah, I get it. This really does seem like kind of a cop-out choice to put most of these worlds on there, but please hear me out. You see, out of all of the Kingdom Hearts games, my very least favorite is actually 358 over 2 days. I don't really have much of an opinion on the phone games as I've never really played them. I've heard they're decent though. But this whole game is just full of shit I don't like, from the combat that never really feels good, to the really, really annoying level up system, to how the story basically doesn't matter until you play 3/Dream Drop Distance. But the biggest problem for me was the worlds themselves. In Kingdom Hearts 358, I'm just going to call it that, I don't like saying the full name, it's also a really dumb full name if you think about it. The game doesn't exactly function like the other games, because in this one, you're playing through Roxas' time as part of Organization 13. And as a member, Roxas has to carry out various missions to help achieve Kingdom Hearts. So you're basically just an errand boy doing incredibly brain-dead and boring things, like reconning worlds and fighting a select amount of Heartless to fill a quota. There are other missions, of course, but none of this would be as shitty if the levels actually had life to them, which they don't. The levels feel like no love whatsoever was put into them at all. They're, the kind of levels you could really replace with like a blank background and nothing would really seem all that different. And it's even worse when you pin it up to Recoded, which tried to make several of the levels feel different by adding something unique, like Wonderland's stealth section or Olympus becoming a turn-based combat. It sticks out more to just how bland 358 is with its world design. It also doesn't help that you barely interact with any Disney characters at all, making them feel even more like bland placeholders. With how the levels are designed, it's no wonder I just didn't end up liking any of them, and that's kinda why I just grouped them all together. That's all for this list, everybody. Thank you for watching, and again, please make sure you leave a like and a sub if you enjoyed this content, and drop a comment as well. I'd love to hear how all of you thought of this video. Take care, and I'll hopefully see you next time.